Welcome to the peaceful space of sleep-friendly science, where we journey to the very edge of understanding, exploring the Earth not as a solid, static rock, but as the living, breathing entity with the history written in stone and time. Tonight, we travel back 1 billion years to reconstruct a world that no human has ever seen, a lost supercontinent named Rodinia. We will piece together its ghosts from the clues it left behind, scattered across our modern globe. If you enjoy these journeys into deep time and gentle science, please consider liking or subscribing. It helps our quiet corner of the universe grow. Now settle in, take a deep breath, and let the soft sounds guide you as we begin tonight's journey into the unknown. Section 1. An unstill world. Imagine, if you will, that you are drifting in the quiet, weightless dark of space. Below you, suspended in the endless velvet, is our home, the Earth. It turns with a slow, silent, and steady grace. You see the familiar, beautiful patterns, the brilliant white swirls of cloud, like fresh paint on a canvas of impossible blue. The deep, dark sapphire of the oceans, holding secrets and light in their depths. And then you see the land. You see the powerful shoulder of Africa, fitting so neatly against the gentle curve of South America, as if they were once lovers who drifted apart. You see the vast, sprawling expanse of Asia, connected to a fractured Europe. You see the island continent of Australia, isolated and serene, and the icy crown of Antarctica, a continent of ghosts at the bottom of the world. It is the world of our maps, the world of our globes. The world we are taught is solid, permanent, a fixed stage upon which the fleeting drama of life unfolds. From this divine vantage point, the planet seems to be holding its breath. There is a profound sense of stillness, of permanence. The mountains look like ancient, unmoving wrinkles on the planet's skin. The coastlines appear as if they were etched in stone by a final, divine hand. This is the Earth as we know it, a foundation beneath our feet, the very definition of solid ground. But this stillness is an illusion. It is a trick played on us by our own fleeting existence. Our human timescale, with its frantic rush of seconds, minutes, and years, is too fast to perceive the planet's true nature. We are like mayflies, living for a day on the bank of a great river, convinced the river has never moved and will never move. We see a single frame of an impossibly long film, and we mistake it for the entire story. Let your mind adjust now. Slow down your perception. Let a year pass like a single second, then a century, then a millennium. As you watch the Earth from your quiet perch in the cosmos, watching 1,000 years blink by in a moment, you begin to see it. A subtle, deep, and undeniable motion. The ground beneath our feet is not ground at all. It is a collection of immense, continental-sized rafts, floating on a sea of slowly churning molten rock far below. The continents are moving. They are not racing, of course. Their pace is one of majestic patience. The speed at which your own fingernails grow a few centimeters a year is the speed of this global dance. South America continues its slow, inexorable drift away from Africa, widening the Atlantic Ocean with every passing moment. India, a colossal traveler, continues its journey northward, pushing relentlessly into the belly of Asia, raising the Himalayas a little higher with each tiny shove, making the roof of the world just a fraction of an inch closer to the stars. The entire Pacific Ocean is slowly shrinking, its floor being swallowed back into the Earth's mantle along its fiery rim. This is the planet's true rhythm, not the frantic beat of a human heart, but the slow, deep, resonant pulse of geology. It is a heartbeat that takes hundreds of millions of years to complete a single cycle. A slow, planetary breathing, in which oceans are born and oceans die, and mountains rise like a great inhale, only to be worn down by wind and rain like a long, slow exhale. When you begin to feel this rhythm, this deep time, the map of our world dissolves. It is no longer a fixed picture. It is a temporary arrangement, a momentary configuration in an endless slow-motion ballet. The shapes of the continents are not final. The oceans are not permanent. The very ground you stand on is on a journey across the face of the planet, A journey that began long before the first human ancestor walked the earth, and one that will continue long after our cities have crumbled to dust. Now, if the continents are moving apart in some places, it stands to reason that they must be moving together in others. And if we can run this film forward in our minds, watching the continents continue their slow drift, we can also run it backward. Let's do that now. Let's become masters of time. With a gentle thought, we will reverse the flow. The Atlantic Ocean, that vast expanse of water, begins to shrink. For every inch it narrows, the Himalayas shrink a fraction of an inch. The slow waltz of the continents reverses its steps. We rewind past the dawn of humanity, past the age of mammals, past the reign of the dinosaurs. The world grows stranger, more alien. The familiar shapes of our world are gone, replaced by a Pangaea, the great supercontinent of the dinosaurs. But we do not stop there. We go deeper. We travel further back into a time so ancient it is difficult to comprehend. We journey back 600 million years. 700. 800. We are rewinding the film past the first complex animals, past the first simple multicellular life, into a world shrouded in mystery. As we drift backward through this immense, dark ocean of time, we see the continents, now completely unrecognizable, continue their backward dance. They are not breaking apart anymore. They are coming together. From all corners of the globe, these great landmasses, the ancient hearts of our modern continents, are drawn to one another. Laurentia, the core of North America, glides towards Baltica, the ancestor of Scandinavia, Siberia, Antarctica, Australia, all pulled by an invisible, inexorable force. They are gathering. They are colliding in the slowest, most powerful impacts imaginable, grinding against one another over millions of years, crumpling their edges to raise mountain ranges taller than any that exist today. They are assembling into a single planetary landmass, a world with one giant continent and one giant ocean. A world so different from our own, it might as well be another planet entirely. This was a real place. An alien Earth that existed a billion years ago. This lost world has a name whispered by geologists from the patterns in ancient rocks. They call it Rodinia, from the Russian word rodit, meaning to give birth, because it was the mother continent from which all subsequent continents, including our own, were born. Feel the name in your mind. Rodinia. It is a ghost. A planetary ghost whose bones are scattered across the globe, hidden within the rocks of our modern world. The mountains of Scotland might share a geological secret with a range in North America. A particular type of rock in Australia might be a perfect match for one found in Antarctica. These are the clues. The breadcrumbs left behind by a world that tore itself apart hundreds of millions of years ago. For now, just hold the image. The image of a single vast landmass, surrounded by a global ocean called Murovia. A world of stark, empty landscapes under a younger, fainter sun. A world where life was simple, clinging to the water's edge. This is our destination. Not a place in space, but a place in time. We are going to become detectives of deep time, archaeologists of the planet itself. We are going to search for the memory of this lost world, to piece together the puzzle of Rodinia, and to understand the story of a planet that is constantly, beautifully, and powerfully unmaking and remaking itself. Section 2. The Rock's Deep Memory. To begin our search for this lost world, you do not need a time machine. You do not need a spaceship. You need only to do something very simple. In your mind's eye, reach down and pick up a stone. It can be any stone. A smooth gray pebble from a riverbed, polished by 1,000 years of flowing water. A sharp-edged piece of granite, glittering with quartz and mica, from a mountainside. A soft, chalky piece of limestone from a coastal cliff, filled with the faint ghosts of microscopic shells. Hold it in your hand. Feel its weight, its texture, its cool, solid reality. To us, a rock is the symbol of silence, of something that has no story to tell. It is inert, unchanging, mute. But this, like the stillness of the continents, is another profound illusion. You are not holding a simple object. You are holding a library. You are holding a diary, written in a language of minerals and heat and pressure over a span of time that dwarfs human history. Every rock on Earth is a vessel of memory. We just need to learn how to read it. This is the first step in our investigation, to understand the language of the stones. The most basic grammar of this language is written in layers. Think of a cliff face you may have seen, with bands of different colors and textures stacked one on top of another. This is called stratigraphy, and it is the Earth's most fundamental storytelling technique. Just like a pile of old newspapers, the oldest layers are at the bottom, and the youngest are at the top. A dark band of shale might speak of a time when a deep, quiet sea lay here, where fine mud slowly settled on the ocean floor. A thick layer of coarse, tan sandstone above it tells of a change, a time when the sea receded and great rivers carried sand to this spot. A layer of coal tells of a lush, swampy forest that grew and died and was buried. Each layer is a chapter in the planet's autobiography, and the type of rock itself tells a story of its own. Geologists see three main families of rock, three great clans that each recount a different kind of origin. Sedimentary rocks, like the sandstone and shale, are born of water and wind. They are the children of erosion. They are formed from the broken-down pieces of other, older rock, sand, mud, pebbles, and the tiny skeletons of sea creatures that are carried by rivers or currents and laid down, layer by patient layer, compressed by the weight of the world above until they turn back into stone. When we find sedimentary rock, we know we are looking at the floor of an ancient sea, the bed of a lost lake, or the floodplain of a forgotten river. Then there are the igneous rocks, the children of fire. They are born from molten rock or magma that cools and solidifies. If it erupts from a volcano and cools quickly on the surface, it forms rocks like basalt, dark and fine-grained, the very stuff that makes up our ocean floors. If the magma cools slowly, deep within the Earth's crust, it forms granite, its crystals having had millions of years to grow large and beautiful. When we find igneous rock, we know we have found the heart of an ancient volcano, or the deep plumbing of a mountain range that has long since eroded away. The third family is perhaps the most fascinating, and the most important for our story. It is the metamorphic rock, the rock of transformation. These are rocks that were once something else. They could have started as sedimentary or igneous but were then subjected to such incredible heat and pressure that their very nature was changed. They were not melted but baked, squeezed, and twisted, their minerals reforming into new patterns and new stones. A humble shale under this immense duress can be reborn as a shimmering layered slate. A simple sandstone can be transformed into a tough, crystalline quartzite. Metamorphic rocks are the story of stress. They are the scars of the planet, and they tell us one thing with absolute certainty. Here mountains were being built. Here continents were colliding. So now we have the basic vocabulary. We can pick up a rock and understand whether it speaks of ancient oceans, fiery volcanoes, or the colossal force of colliding landmasses. By mapping where these different rock types and layers are found across the world, geologists can begin to sketch the outlines of forgotten landscapes. They can say, a shallow sea once stretched from what is now the American Midwest all the way to modern-day England, or, a vast mountain range born of a continental collision once stood where the flat plains of West Africa now lie. But this only tells us what happened. It doesn't tell us where on the globe it happened. How can we know that a piece of North America was once near the equator? How can we prove that India was once deep in the southern hemisphere? For this we need a ghost. We need to find a compass needle frozen in time. And incredibly, the Earth has provided one. It is hidden within the igneous rocks, the children of fire. As hot lava or magma cools, tiny, iron-rich mineral grains within it begin to crystallize. And these minerals, magnetite is a common one, are magnetic. As they form in that liquid fiery soup, they behave like microscopic compass needles. They align themselves with the Earth's magnetic field. all dutifully pointing towards the planet's magnetic north pole. Then, as the rock cools further and becomes solid, these tiny needles are locked in place. They are frozen, pointing in the direction of north at the moment the rock was born. The rock becomes a fossil compass. It carries within it a perfect, permanent record of its location, its latitude in the planet from millions, or even billions of years ago. This science is called paleomagnetism, the study of ancient magnetism, and it is the single most powerful piece of evidence we have for continental drift. Imagine a scientist in Norway drilling a core from a lava flow known to be 400 million years old. They take it back to the lab, and with sensitive instruments they measure the direction of those tiny frozen magnetic needles. But the needles don't point towards the current North Pole. They point sideways, indicating that when this rock was formed, it was located at the equator. The only possible conclusion is that the entire landmass of Norway has drifted thousands of miles north over the last 400 million years. Now, apply this technique all over the world. A rock from Australia tells a story of being in the northern hemisphere. A rock from Antarctica whispers of a time when it basked in a temperate climate. We are no longer guessing. We can now trace the precise paths of the continents as they skated across the face of the planet. It's like finding a fleet of lost ships, and each ship's logbook is open to a single page, telling you its exact latitude on a specific date. By piecing together thousands of these logbooks, we can reconstruct their epic voyages. We have the rock types to tell us the environment, and paleomagnetism to tell us the latitude. But there is one more crucial clue: the faint traces of life itself. By the time Rodinia was forming, life was still very simple. There were no fish, no plants, no animals. But there were vast, mat-like colonies of bacteria, called stromatolites, that grew in shallow, sunlit waters, trapping sediment and building up stony, layered mounds, some small, some as large as cars. These were the planet's first architects. And like all living things, different types evolved in different places at different times. If geologists find a sequence of rock layers in, say, the Scottish Highlands that contains a specific, unique type of microfossil from a billion years ago, and then they find the exact same type of microfossil in rocks of the exact same age in the mountains of Greenland, it is a geological fingerprint. It is powerful evidence that at that time, Scotland and Greenland were not separated by an ocean, but were part of the same landmass, sharing the same coastline, home to the same simple forms of life. We can match the mountain ranges, the rock types, the magnetic signatures, and the fossils. The puzzle pieces begin to lock together. The ghost of Rodinia begins to take shape, emerging from the mists of deep time, beckoning us to understand the forces that brought it into being. Section 3. The planet's slow heartbeat. Now that we have learned the language of the rocks and found the Earth's frozen compass, we must ask a deeper question. What is the force that moves continents? What is the engine that drives this slow global dance? It is not a force that acts upon the surface. It is a power that comes from deep within, from the very heart of our planet. To understand it, we must journey downward, through the crust, and into the Earth's hidden interior. Imagine you are standing on the ground on the solid rock or soil of a continent. This layer beneath your feet, the crust, is surprisingly thin. It is like the delicate skin of an apple compared to the fruit within. The continental crust, which makes up the land, is thick, buoyant, and old. It's made of lighter rocks like granite, and it floats high. The oceanic crust, which forms the floor of the oceans, is different. It's thinner, denser, made of heavy basalt, and it floats lower. This is why our planet has two distinct levels: the high ground of the continents and the low basins of the oceans. Beneath this thin, brittle skin lies the next layer, a region of immense size and power: the mantle. The mantle makes up the vast majority of the Earth's volume. It is not a liquid, not a sea of molten rock as is often imagined. For the most part, it is a solid. But it is a very special kind of solid. It is a rock that is so incredibly hot, thousands of degrees, that it can flow, not like water, but like a river of unimaginably thick, hot tar or honey. It moves with a colossal slowness, churning over millions and millions of years. This slow, creeping flow is called convection. You have seen convection in your own kitchen. When you heat a pot of soup on a stove, the soup at the bottom gets hot, becomes less dense and rises. When it reaches the surface, it cools, becomes denser again, and sinks back down, only to be heated and rise once more. This creates a slow rolling circulation within the pot. Now, imagine this same process on a planetary scale. The stove is the Earth's core, a sphere of incandescent iron at the center of our world, blazing as hot as the surface of the sun. The soup is the 1,800-mile thick mantle, heated from below by the core's ferocious heat, and also by the slow decay of radioactive elements scattered throughout it. Great regions of the mantle become slightly hotter and more buoyant. Over eons, these vast plumes of hot rock begin to rise, creeping upward at a pace of just a few centimeters a year. When they approach the underside of the Earth's crust, they spread out, dragging on the solid plates above them like a current pulling on a raft. As this material flows sideways, it begins to cool and eventually, it sinks back down into the depths, creating enormous, slow-moving circular currents, convection cells that churn within the planet's interior. This is the engine. This is the planet's slow heartbeat. The continents, the tectonic plates, are not moving on their own. They are passengers, riding on the back of these colossal planetary-scale convection currents in the mantle below. The entire surface of our world is broken into about a dozen major plates and many smaller ones, all jostling and grinding against each other as they are ferried about by the mantle's deep, slow song. Where the mantle currents are rising and moving apart, they exert a powerful tearing force on the crust above. They stretch it, thin it, and eventually rip it asunder. This is how new oceans are born. The Great Rift Valley in East Africa is a place where this is happening right now. The continent of Africa is being slowly torn apart. Magma is welling up from below, creating volcanoes like Mount Kilimanjaro. The land is sinking, and one day, many millions of years from now, the Indian Ocean will flood in, and a new ocean will separate East Africa from the rest of the continent. On a grander scale, this is what happened between South America and Africa, creating the Atlantic. Along the center of that ocean lies the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a vast underwater mountain range where new oceanic crust is constantly being created as magma rises from the mantle to fill the gap. But the Earth is not getting bigger. So, if new crust is being created in one place, old crust must be destroyed somewhere else. This happens where two plates are pushed together by the mantle's currents. When a dense oceanic plate collides with a lighter, more buoyant continental plate, something has to give. The oceanic plate, being heavier, loses the battle. It is forced to bend and dive downward, plunging back into the mantle in a process called subduction. This is where the planet recycles itself. As the oceanic plate descends, it scrapes against the overriding continental plate, causing powerful earthquakes. The plate carries water down with it, which lowers the melting point of the surrounding mantle, creating magma that rises to the surface to form explosive volcanoes. The ring of fire around the Pacific Ocean is a vast chain of subduction zones, a testament to the immense power of a dying ocean floor. This is where mountains are born, where continents are crumpled, and where the Earth's crust is consumed and reborn. There is a third type of boundary as well, where plates do not collide head-on or pull apart, but instead slide past each other horizontally. The San Andreas Fault in California is the most famous example of this. The Pacific Plate is grinding northwestward past the North American Plate. There is no creation or destruction of crust here, just the steady buildup and violent release of friction, resulting in powerful earthquakes. So, picture this planetary system in your mind: a fiery core, a churning mantle, and a thin, broken crust. It is a dynamic, interconnected machine. The heat from the core drives the mantle convection. The mantle convection drives the movement of the plates. The movement of the plates creates oceans, builds mountains, and fuels volcanoes. It is a single unified system, a physical expression of the planet's aliveness. It is this very engine that brought Rodinia into being. Before Rodinia, there were other continents scattered across the globe. But the mantle currents of 1 billion years ago were in a configuration that pushed everything together. Imagine several different convection cells in the mantle, all their currents converging on a single point on the globe. Any continent, any piece of crust caught in these currents would be dragged inexorably towards that point of convergence. The process would have been agonizingly slow, a gathering that took hundreds of millions of years. It was not a gentle docking. It was a series of the most titanic collisions the world has ever known. As two continents, each hundreds of miles thick, were driven into one another by the mantle's unstoppable force, their edges would have buckled, folded, and shattered. The rock caught in this colossal vice would have been metamorphosed, transformed by the heat and pressure into new forms. Mountains would have risen to heights we can barely imagine, their peaks thrusting into the thin, ancient air. Great slabs of crust would have been shoved on top of others, thickening the landmass. This process, the mountain building that occurs when continents collide, is called orogeny. The assembly of Rodinia was a global orogeny, a worldwide mountain building event. One by one, the ancient hearts of our modern continents, Laurentia, Baltica, Amazonia, Siberia, Australia, Antarctica, were drawn into this great celestial traffic jam, welded together by heat and pressure, stitched together by chains of newly formed metamorphic rock. The oceans that once separated them were squeezed shut, their floors subducted back into the mantle until they vanished completely. And when the final collision was over, the slow heartbeat of the planet had accomplished its grand design. The scattered lands were united. Rodinia was born, a single supercontinent, dominating one hemisphere of a lonely, quiet Earth. Section 4. The Great Gathering of Lands. Let us now stand as silent observers at the dawn of this ancient assembly. We rewind our perception of time until a year is but a fleeting moment, and 1,000,000 years pass as a slow, steady breath. We are looking down upon a world that would be, to our eyes, an alien water world, dotted with large, unfamiliar islands and small continents. These are the protocontinents, the cratons, the ancient stable cores of the landmasses we know today. They are adrift in a vast global ocean, the Mirovia. Let's meet some of the main players in this grand drama. There is Laurentia, a vast and ancient landmass that carries within it the seeds of North America, Greenland, and parts of Scotland. It is a rugged, barren landscape, its rock a deep, weathered red under a sun that shines with a little less ferocity than our own. Then there is Baltica, the ancestor of Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, and Siberia, floating as separate entities. In the southern hemisphere we find a cluster of lands, the cores of Antarctica and Australia, already close companions, and the great landmasses of Amazonia and West Africa, which will one day form the hearts of South America and Africa. The mantle's currents, the planet's slow heartbeat, are now arranged in a pattern of convergence. A great downwelling, a place where the churning mantle rock is sinking back into the depths, is acting like a cosmic drain, pulling the surface plates towards it. And so the slow dance begins. From the north, the great continent of Laurentia begins its majestic, unhurried journey southward. It moves no faster than a drifting cloud, but its momentum is that of a world. Its path is set for a collision. Coming from the south and east are the combined landmasses of Amazonia and Baltica. They are on a converging course, destined to meet Laurentia in a planetary-scale impact that will unfold over tens of millions of years. As they draw closer, the ocean that separates them begins to shrink. The floor of this ocean, made of heavy basaltic rock, is being forced down into the mantle in a vast subduction zone. Along the edges of the approaching continents, a line of fire appears. Volcanoes erupt, spewing ash and gas into the thin atmosphere, as the descending ocean plate melts and feeds magma to the surface. The air fills with the smell of sulfur and the sky is often hazed with volcanic smog. Earthquakes of a magnitude we can scarcely imagine constantly shake these coastal regions as the plates scrape and grind against each other. Finally, after a journey lasting longer than the entire age of mammals, the continents make contact. It is not a sudden crash, but a slow, grinding, and unbelievably powerful compression. Imagine two colossal ice floes being pushed together. Their edges do not simply meet. They crumple, they shatter, they ride up on top of one another. Now magnify that image a million times. The leading edge of Laurentia meets the edge of Amazonia. The sedimentary rocks that had formed on the shallow sea floor between them, layers of mud and sand that had been accumulating for eons, are now caught in this immense geological vise. They have nowhere to go. They are squeezed, folded, and faulted. Layers that were once flat are bent into huge, wave-like arches and troughs. They are heated by the friction and the pressure, and their very mineralogy begins to change. The soft mudstone is transformed into shimmering slate and schist. The immense pressure and heat cause the rock to behave almost like a plastic, buckling and flowing in slow motion. Great sheets of rock, hundreds of miles wide, are sheared off and thrust dozens of miles inland, sliding over the top of the adjacent continent. This is the birth of a mountain range. The Grenville orogeny. This was not just a chain of mountains. It was a scar that would eventually stretch for thousands of miles, a belt of intensely deformed and metamorphosed rock that stitched the colliding continents together. The mountains that rose from this collision would have dwarfed our modern Himalayas. They were giants of rock and ice, their peaks scraping the upper atmosphere, their slopes barren and devoid of any life save for a thin sheen of microbial slime in the meltwater streams. The evidence for this colossal mountain range is still with us today. It is the geological spine that runs through the heart of Rodinia. We find its roots, the deeply eroded core of this ancient range, in the Grenville province of eastern North America, for which it is named. But we also find matching rocks of the exact same age and type in the highlands of Scotland, in the remote valleys of Norway, and even in the rocks of Texas and Mexico. They are scattered now, torn apart and separated by oceans. But when you wind back the clock and reassemble the continents, these disparate pieces of evidence all line up, forming a single continuous belt. They are the stitches that held the supercontinent together. While this central collision was forming the backbone of the new landmass, other continents were being drawn into the fold. The combined continent of Australia and Antarctica, moving as a single block, approached from another direction, eventually docking with the western coast of ancient North America. Another great orogenic belt was formed, another chain of towering mountains, its faint echoes now found in the rocks of Western America and the remote coasts of Antarctica. Siberia, another major craton, was also pulled in, attaching itself to another part of the growing supercontinent. One by one, the scattered pieces of continental crust were swept up in this great gathering, like leaves being raked into a single pile. Each collision added to the central landmass. Each one created another range of spectacular, lifeless mountains. The oceans that had once separated these lands, with their unique currents and chemistries, were gone forever, their floors entirely subducted into the mantle. And then, after perhaps 200 million years of this slow, relentless assembly, it was done. The mantle currents shifted, the great convergence ceased. The collisions ended. A fragile quiet descended upon the planet. Where once there were many continents and many oceans, there was now only one. Rodinia. Picture it now in its final assembled form. A single colossal landmass sprawling across the equator. Its interior is a vast high-altitude plateau, dominated by the immense mountain ranges formed during its assembly. These are young, sharp, jagged peaks far higher than Everest, their summits encased in ice. From these highlands, great rivers, milky with ground-up rock, flow outwards towards the sea. The landscape is harsh, empty, and alien. The color palette of this world is one of reds, oranges, and graced colors of raw, unweathered rock. There are no trees, no grasses, no soils to soften the contours of the land. The sun beats down from a sky that is a paler blue than ours. The atmosphere has far less oxygen, and the ozone layer is weaker, allowing more harsh ultraviolet radiation to reach the surface. It is not a welcoming world. Surrounding this single great landmass is a single great ocean, Rodinia. Its waters stretch from pole to pole, a continuous expanse of deep blue. Its currents, no longer broken up by continents, flow in vast, simple global gyres. The weather on Rodinia is a thing of brutal extremes. The coastal regions are battered by immense hurricanes, borne over the uninterrupted expanse of the global ocean. The deep interior, thousands of miles from the moderating influence of the sea, is an extreme desert, bone-dry and subject to huge temperature swings between day and night. This was the world a billion years ago, a planet of one land, one ocean, a world built by the slow, inexorable power of the Earth's deep heart. It was a world of stark and magnificent desolation, waiting for life to truly take hold, and waiting for the internal tensions that would eventually, inevitably, tear it all apart once more. Section 5. Life on an alien Earth. Let us now descend from our cosmic vantage point and set foot upon the shores of this ancient, alien world. Feel the ground beneath your feet. It is not soil, not the soft, dark earth we know, rich with the decay of a billion years of fallen leaves and burrowing creatures. It is raw grit, sand, and sharp-edged gravel, the direct unmediated product of rock being broken down by wind and water. The air you breathe is thin and sharp, noticeably lacking in the rich oxygen content our lungs are accustomed to. Above, the sun seems smaller, a little more distant, its light less golden and more starkly white against a pale blue sky. The defining feature of this world is its silence. It is a silence so deep and profound it is almost a sound in itself. There is no birdsong to greet the dawn, no buzz of insects in the afternoon heat, no rustle of leaves in the wind, for there are no leaves. There is only the sigh of the wind across bare rock, the distant boom and hiss of waves on the shoreline, and the gurgle of water in the barren riverbeds. It is the sound of a planet without a voice. The land of Rodinia is a desert, not just in its vast arid interior but everywhere. It is a world painted in mineral colors, the ochre of iron oxides, the gray of granite, the black of basalt. There is no green. The very concept of a forest, a meadow, or a jungle does not exist. The land is a sterile expanse, scoured by winds that carry abrasive sand, and blasted by a level of ultraviolet radiation from the sun that would be lethal to most modern life. The great mountain ranges, the stitches that hold Rodinia together, are jagged and fresh, their slopes not softened by vegetation but scarred by immense rockfalls and landslides. In this stark, seemingly dead landscape, you might think life has not yet found its footing. But you would be wrong. Life is here. It is just patient, humble, and hidden. To find it, you must walk away from the harsh interior and towards the one place on the planet that offers refuge: the water. Follow a river, a channel of milky water thick with suspended rock flour flowing from the glaciers of the inland mountains, down to the coast. As you approach the great Rodinia Ocean, you begin to see the first signs. The water in the shallow coastal lagoons and tidal flats is not clear. It is cloudy with the soupy greenish-brown suspension of single-celled organisms. This is the phytoplankton, the microscopic dust of life. For hundreds of millions of years, these tiny cells, bacteria and primitive algae, have been patiently performing a miracle. They have been learning to eat sunlight. Through the quiet magic of photosynthesis, they are drawing in carbon dioxide from the thin atmosphere and using the sun's energy to turn it into sugars for themselves. And in the process, they are releasing a waste product, a gas that is, at this point in history, a volatile corrosive poison to many other forms of life. That gas is oxygen. For now, it is just a whisper in the atmosphere, quickly absorbed by the iron-rich rocks and dissolved in the ocean. But these humble single-celled pioneers are slowly, painstakingly, beginning to terraform the entire planet. They are changing the sky. Wade into the warm, shallow water of a tidal flat. Look down. The floor of the sea here is not sand or mud, but is covered in strange, lumpy, layered structures. They look like stony cabbages or cauliflower heads, ranging from the size of your fist to the size of a small car. They are slippery to the touch, with a thin gelatinous film of green and brown. These are stromatolites, the great cities of the microbial world. Each one is a community, a layered ecosystem built by cyanobacteria. The top layer consists of the living, photosynthesizing bacteria, forming a sticky mat. As they live and grow, they trap particles of sediments and in mud that wash over them with the tides. To avoid being buried, the bacteria glide upward, through the sediment, and form a new sticky layer on top. Over thousands of years, this process repeats layer upon layer upon layer, building up the stony laminated structure you see. They are living rocks, the first and most successful architects on Earth, and for nearly 3 billion years, they have been the dominant form of life on the planet. They are the true kings of Rodinia. Peer closer into the water. In the sunlit zones, you might see for the first time something more complex. Not an animal, not a plant, but something new. These are the first eukaryotes. For billions of years, life had been composed of simple prokaryotic cells like bacteria, with their genetic material floating freely inside them. But somewhere, in the quiet evolutionary laboratory of the oceans, a revolution had occurred. One cell had engulfed another, not to digest it, but to form a partnership, a symbiosis. The engulfed cell became the mitochondrion, the power plant of its host. This new, complex cell, with its DNA neatly packaged in a nucleus and its internal machinery, was a eukaryote. It was the ancestor of every plant, every fungus, every animal, and every human being. By the time of Rodinia 1 billion years ago, these eukaryotes had taken a momentous next step. They had learned to cling together after dividing, forming the first tentative multicellular organisms. Perhaps you see a filament of green algae, like a strand of mermaid's hair, waving gently in the current. It is not just a chain of cells. It is a single coordinated organism. Or perhaps you see a small, shapeless blob, a primitive fungus or amoeba, grazing on the bacterial mats. There is a strange and beautiful creature here, a fossil of which has been found in rocks of this age. It is called Bangiomorpha. It looks like a simple seaweed, a small multi-celled filament anchored to the seafloor. But it has a secret. It has produced 2 different types of cell spores. Scientists believe these might be the first sex cells, the first male and female gametes. This humble little algae, clinging to a rock on the coast of Rodinia, had discovered sexual reproduction. This was an invention that would change the world, introducing a new way of shuffling genes that would dramatically accelerate the pace of evolution. The slow, patient march of life was about to pick up its pace. But for now, the world is quiet. The drama of life is happening on a small scale, in the sunlit fringes of the great empty continent. The deepest parts of the Murovaya Ocean are largely anoxic and toxic, devoid of oxygen, and filled with poisonous hydrogen sulfide. The land remains an unconquered fortress. There is a delicate and perhaps dangerous balance to this world. Rodinia, this single supercontinent, is acting like a giant lid on the planet. It is trapping the heat from the mantle beneath it. The rock below the center of the continent is getting hotter and hotter. At the same time, the vast, unbroken Murovaya Ocean allows for simple, stable ocean currents and weather patterns. The coastal regions where life is thriving are fed by nutrients washing off the vast, eroding landmass. Life is biding its time. It has invented the complex eukaryotic cell. It has invented multicellularity. It has invented sex. All the tools for a biological explosion are being sharpened. But the stage is not yet set. The world itself, the physical geography of the planet, is holding it back. Rodinia, the great unifier of the lands, the very thing that brought the world together, is now becoming a prison for life's burgeoning potential. Something has to give. The planet's slow heartbeat, which brought this world into being, is beginning to beat to a different rhythm. Deep beneath the silent, empty continent, the pressure is building. The great gathering is over. The great breaking is about to begin. Section 6. The cracks of a breaking world. For millions of years, the world of Rodinia existed in a state of majestic but fragile equilibrium. The great continent, a single shield of ancient rock, lay sprawled under the pale sun, while the global Mirovia ocean circulated around it in slow, predictable patterns. On the surface, it was a world of immense quiet and stability, but deep below, in the hidden heart of the planet, a sickness was growing. Rodinia's greatest strength, its sheer size, had become its fatal weakness. Like a vast lid placed over a simmering pot, the supercontinent was trapping the immense heat flowing upward from the Earth's core and mantle. The normal process of planetary cooling, which allows heat to escape through the thin crust of the oceans, was being stifled. Underneath the center of Rodinia, the mantle began to cook. The temperature rose century after century, millennium after millennium. The planet was developing a fever, and the focus of that fever was the rock directly beneath the supercontinent. Slowly, a change began in the mantle's circulation. The trapped heat began to coalesce, fueling the rise of a monstrous upwelling of superheated roca mantle plume. Imagine a bubble in a thick, boiling liquid, but one that is hundreds of miles across and rises with a patience that defies all human conception. It was not a violent eruption, but a slow, inexorable swelling from the depths. This superplume, a column of rock hotter and more buoyant than its surroundings, crept upward for millions of years, pushing its way toward the underside of the continental plate. When it finally arrived, it pressed against the base of Rodinia with unimaginable force. The continent, which had seemed so solid and permanent, began to bulge. The center of the landmass was being lifted, almost imperceptibly at first, into a vast high dome. An area the size of modern Africa was slowly being pushed skyward. Rivers that had flowed for eons towards the interior found their courses slowing, stagnating, and eventually reversing, now flowing away from the growing central highland. The land itself was being stretched like a piece of dough being pushed up from beneath. The rock of the continental crust, thick and strong as it was, could only endure so much tension. It began to thin, to weaken. Deep within the crust, ancient fault lines groaned under the new strain. For millions of years the continent held, but the pressure from below was relentless. And then it began to break. The first crack was not a single event. It was a process, a tearing that unfolded over an age. It began as a series of parallel faults, lines of weakness where the stretched crust finally gave way. The block of land between these faults began to drop. A valley was born. This was not a valley carved by a river, but a valley created by the world itself pulling apart. This was a rift valley. A great linear scar began to form across the face of Rodinia, a wound marking the spot where the planet's fever was about to break. Stand now in your mind's eye on the edge of this nascent rift. The ground shudders constantly with tremors, the deep, resonant vibrations of a continent in distress. Across the valley, miles away, is a towering cliff, the newly formed escarpment of the rift wall, rising sheer and stark. The valley floor is a chaotic landscape of shattered rock, sunken blocks, and steaming fissures. The silence of Rodinia is gone. It has been replaced by the hiss of escaping gas, the rumble of perpetual earthquakes, and the deafening roar of rockslides as the valley walls collapse and widen. The thinning of the crust provided a pathway. The magma from the mantle plume, which had been pushing from below, could now force its way to the surface. And it did not come from a single conical volcano. It erupted from enormous fissures, some of them hundreds of miles long, that opened up along the floor of the Rift Valley. This was not an eruption, it was a deluge, a flood of fire. Rivers of incandescent black basaltic lava poured out, not for a week or a year, but for thousands of years at a time. They filled the bottom of the Rift Valley, burying the shattered landscape under a sea of molten rock. Layer after layer was laid down, creating vast volcanic plains known as flood basalts. The sky, for centuries on end, would have been choked with volcanic ash and poisonous gases like sulfur dioxide, turning the heavens a permanent, sickly yellow-brown and triggering torrential acid rains that stripped the rock of its minerals. The very chemistry of the atmosphere and the oceans began to change. The heat, the gases, the sheer scale of this volcanism was a cataclysm that dwarfed any single eruption known in human history. It was the planet itself bleeding out its internal heat. And this was not happening in just one place. The immense heat trapped beneath Rodinia was likely causing multiple plumes to form, attacking the supercontinent from below at its weakest points. One rift began to tear Laurentia, ancient North America, away from the coast of what would become South America. Another great rift began to open between Baltica and Laurentia. Yet another started to unzip the connection between Australia, Antarctica, and the rest of the landmass. The great supercontinent was doomed. The colossal structure that had taken 200 million years to assemble was now being systematically dismantled by the very forces that created it. The rigid, unified lid was being broken into smaller pieces. The prison walls were beginning to crumble. The rift valleys continued to widen and deepen. The constant eruption of new volcanic rock on the valley floors created dense, heavy oceanic crust. The floor of the rifts, now weighed down by this new basalt, began to sink even further, dropping below the level of the Great Morovia Ocean. Imagine that final dramatic moment. The coastal barrier that had held the ocean at bay for so long, weakened by endless earthquakes and erosion, finally collapses. With a roar that would shake the heavens, the salt water of the Morovia begins to pour into the searing hot, volcanically active rift. It hits the molten rock and explodes into vast clouds of steam, a waterfall of oceanic proportions, thundering into the newly opened wound in the earth, carrying with it the microscopic life that had been waiting patiently in the coastal waters. The tearing of the land was now becoming the birth of an ocean. The breaking of the world was creating a new one. Section 7. An ocean of opportunity. The breaking of a world sounds like an ending, a cataclysm, a great and terrible violence that shatters the established order. And for the vast, unified landmass of Rodinia, it was indeed an ending. But in the grand cyclical story of our planet, every ending is also a beginning. The destruction of Rodinia was not a tragedy for life. It was the single greatest opportunity life had ever been given. The shattering of the continental prison set the stage for an explosion of biological creativity that would forever change the face of the earth. Let us return to the newly formed rift, now flooded by the sea. Where once there was a smoking arid valley, there is now a long, narrow and shallow ocean, a proto-ocean. Think of the Red Sea or the Gulf of California today. These are modern examples of young oceans being born in the same way. The waters are warm and teeming with the nutrients being unleashed by the immense volcanism on the seafloor and the rapid erosion of the fresh, new coastlines. The creation of these new seas had a profound and immediate effect. It changed the geography of life. Before the breakup, life was largely confined to the periphery of one giant continent. It was a single immense coastline. But as Rodinia fractured into smaller pieces, the amount of coastline on the planet increased dramatically. Every time a continent was ripped in two, two new coastlines were born where there had been none before. Suddenly, there were thousands of miles of new shallow sunlit seas. Thousands of miles of new tidal flats, lagoons, and estuaries. These were the cradles of life, the prime real estate for the photosynthetic microbes and the simple multicellular organisms that had been biding their time. The available habitat for life on Earth expanded exponentially. It was like a door being flung open, revealing 1,000 new, empty rooms waiting to be inhabited. The rifting process did more than just create space. It provided nourishment. The intense hydrothermal activity along the new mid-ocean ridges, the volcanic seams where the new oceans were opening up, acted like a massive infusion of vitamins into the water. Vents on the seafloor spewed out a rich chemical broth, full of essential minerals like phosphorus, iron, and silica. At the same time, the creation of new coastlines and the uplift of the rift flanks increased the rate of weathering and erosion on land. The torrential acid rains caused by the volcanic gases dissolved the rock, and the newly energized rivers carried a bonanza of nutrients down into these burgeoning seas. The oceans, which may have been relatively sterile in the vast expanses of the Murovia, were now becoming a rich, fertile soup. The base of the food chain, the phytoplankton, bloomed. With more sunlight, more space, and more food, their populations exploded. And as they bloomed, they pumped more and more of their waste product oxygen into the water and the atmosphere. The slow, patient terraforming project that had been underway for 2 billion years suddenly went into overdrive. This new, oxygen-rich environment was a challenge, but also a tremendous opportunity. Oxygen is a high-energy molecule. Organisms that could learn to use it or breathe it could unleash far more energy from their food than those that could not. It was like switching from a wood fire to a blast furnace. This new high-energy lifestyle, made possible by aerobic respiration, allowed for bigger bodies, faster movement, and more complex behaviors. It fueled the evolution of predators and prey. The fragmentation of the continents also broke up the stable, monotonous climate of the Rodanian world. The simple global ocean currents were replaced by a complex network of eddies and gyres flowing between the new, smaller continents. This created a wider variety of climates and ocean temperatures around the globe. And, crucially, it broke up the monopolies held by certain species. When all the coastlines are connected, a single dominant species of algae or bacteria can spread everywhere, outcompeting all rivals. But when the continents separated, they became isolated evolutionary laboratories. An organism that evolved on the coast of ancient North America was now separated from its cousins on the coast of ancient Australia by thousands of miles of deep ocean. This isolation is a powerful engine of evolution. In these separate, isolated ecosystems, life was free to experiment. A different strategy might work better in the warmer waters around Laurentia than in the cooler seas off Antarctica. Mutations that might have been snuffed out in a globally competitive environment could now gain a foothold and thrive. The breakup of Rodinia created a planetary archipelago, and on each island continent, life began to follow its own unique path. This diversification, this branching out of the tree of life into countless new forms, is the hallmark of what was to come. This period from about 800 to 600 million years ago is known as the Cryogenian and Ediacaran periods. It was a time of incredible environmental turmoil. The breakup of Rodinia had a dramatic and not yet fully understood effect on the global climate. The increased rainfall on the new continents may have drawn down so much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere that it triggered a series of catastrophic ice ages, the snowball Earth events, where the entire planet may have frozen over from poles to equator. These global glaciations would have been the ultimate test. Life would have been pushed to the brink, surviving only in volcanic hotspots or sunlit cracks in the ice. Each time the planet thawed, it was a fresh start, a reset button for evolution. The survivors of these extreme climate swings were incredibly resilient and adaptable. The intense selective pressure of these events may have been the final trigger needed to push life towards a new level of complexity. And it did. As the last of the great ice ages receded about 580 million years ago, something truly miraculous appeared in the fossil record. For the first time, we see the ghosts of large, complex multicellular animals. Not just algae and amoebas, but macroscopic organisms some several feet long. This is the Ediacaran biota. They were strange, quilted, frond-like creatures, unlike anything alive today. Some lay flat on the seafloor, absorbing nutrients through their skin. Some stood upright like bizarre leafless ferns filtering food from the water. None of them seemed to have had mouths, guts, or shells. They were a completely alien experiment in what it means to be an animal. They were the first children of the New World, born from the opportunities created by Rodinia's demise. They were the pioneers, the first foray into animal life, made possible by the oxygen-rich, nutrient-filled, and geographically diverse seas of the post-Rodinia planet. The breaking of the world had broken the chains that held back evolution. The stage was now set for the next great act, the Cambrian explosion, when the ancestors of nearly all modern animals would burst onto the scene in a frenzy of creation. The serene, silent world of Rodinia was a distant memory, replaced by a dynamic, challenging, and vibrant planet, finally ready to come alive. Section 8. Scars across modern continents. The story of Rodinia feels impossibly distant, a tale from a lost eon. A world that has vanished so completely that it might as well have been a dream. The great supercontinent is gone. The towering Grenville Mountains have been worn down to their very roots. The shallow, life-giving seas that flanked the rifting continents have long since closed and disappeared. And yet, the ghost of Rodinia is not entirely gone. It has not vanished without a trace. It has left its signature, its scars and memories, embedded in the very fabric of our modern world. To find this ghost, you just have to know where to look. Imagine you are a geologist, a detective of deep time. Your crime scene is the entire planet. Your clues are not fingerprints and fibers, but rock formations, mineral deposits, and the faint magnetic whispers locked in stone. You are looking for matches, for connections between lands now separated by thousands of miles of ocean. You are piecing together the torn fragments of a very old map. Let us begin our search in a place known for its ancient and rugged beauty, the Scottish Highlands. As you walk through the remote, windswept valleys of the Northwest Highlands, through places like Torridon and Assynt, you are walking on some of the oldest rocks in Europe. This is the Hebridean terrain, a fragment of an ancient continent. The rock here is a distinctive type of metamorphic gneiss, called Lewisian gneiss, heavily deformed and ancient. Now, travel across the vast Atlantic Ocean to the eastern coast of Greenland. There, you will find rocks of the exact same type, the same age, and with the same complex geological history. It's a perfect match. Now, cross the Davis Strait to Labrador on the coast of Canada. You find it again. The same ancient rock, the same geological signature. You have just found a piece of Rodinia's edge. You have demonstrated that 1 billion years ago, Scotland, Greenland, and North America were not separated by an ocean. They were fused together, part of the single colossal landmass of Laurentia. The North Atlantic Ocean is a recent development, a tear that opened up much, much later, ripping this single, ancient geological province in two. The rugged beauty of the Scottish Highlands is a direct inheritance from its time as part of a much larger continent. Our search for Rodinia's backbone, the Great Grenville Mountain Range, takes us on an even grander journey. We start in Quebec, Canada, in a region called the Grenville Province. Here we find a wide belt of deeply eroded rock, intensely metamorphosed about 1 billion years ago. These are the roots of those ancient mountains, the deep plumbing that lay miles beneath the soaring peaks. They are rich in unusual minerals and have a distinct chemical fingerprint. Now we follow the trail. We travel south down the spine of the Appalachian Mountains in the United States. Hidden beneath the younger rocks of the Appalachians, geologists find evidence of the same Grenville-aged event. We find it in the Llano Uplift in Texas, a small island of ancient rock poking through the younger layers of the plains. We find it in Mexico. We are tracing the colossal stitch that sewed Laurentia to Amazonia. But the trail does not stop at the water's edge. We cross the Atlantic. In the remote mountains of Norway and the southern tip of Sweden, we find another perfect match. Rocks of the same age with the same metamorphic history, the same telltale minerals. These rocks, the Svika Norwegian province, line up perfectly with the Grenville Rocks in North America when you close the Atlantic Ocean. This tells us, with startling clarity, that Scandinavia was once pressed hard against the coast of Greenland and Canada. The ghost of this mountain range appears in even more surprising places. Fragments of it have been identified in the Amazon rainforest, and even in the remote mountains of Antarctica. It was a globe-spanning feature, the largest mountain range the world has ever known, and its scattered, eroded remnants are now strewn across half a dozen of our modern continents, a testament to the forces that both built it and tore it apart. The breaking of Rodinia also left its mark. Remember those great rift valleys, the wounds that bled fire and eventually became new oceans? They left scars too. In North America, a feature known as the Mid-Continent Rift System, or the Keweenawen Rift, is a spectacular example. About 1.1 billion years ago, a rift began to tear through the heart of Laurentia, stretching from modern-day Kansas up through Minnesota and under Lake Superior, before hooking down into Michigan. For millions of years, it bled enormous amounts of basaltic lava, and the crust began to split. But this rift failed. It was an abortion of an ocean. The forces that were tearing the continent apart waned before they could succeed, and the rift healed over, leaving a deep, 1,200-mile-long scar of dense volcanic rock, hidden beneath the younger sediments of the American Midwest. This buried scar is so dense and magnetic that it can be clearly seen in gravity and magnetic surveys of the continent. It is also the source of the vast copper deposits of the Lake Superior region, a mineral wealth brought up from the mantle during that ancient, failed attempt to break a continent. We can also find evidence of the new oceans that were born. On the western edge of North America, in the rocks of the Rocky Mountains, we find thick sequences of sedimentary rock from this time that were not deposited by rivers or in lakes. They are deep-water sediments, the kind that form on a continental shelf, at the edge of a true ocean. This marks the place where Laurentia was finally separated from its neighbor, perhaps Australia or Siberia, creating a new ocean basin, the ancestor of the Pacific. By piecing together these thousands of disparate Cloaca rock type here, a fossil there, a magnetic signature, a mineral deposit, geologists become cartographers of deep time. They can take the modern continents, cut them out like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and move them across the globe, guided by the paleomagnetic data. They can rotate them and fit them back together. And when they do, the puzzle snaps into place. The Grenville Mountains of North America connect seamlessly with the Svea-Norwegian belt of Scandinavia. The ancient craton of East Antarctica fits snugly against the western coast of North America. The coastlines of ancient India and Australia align. The ghost takes form. Rodinia emerges from the data, a coherent and compelling picture of a lost world. It is a triumph of scientific detective work, a story told by the Earth itself. The ground you walk on, the mountains you see, the very rocks beneath your city are not just static features of our world. They are characters in a much older, much grander story. They are the fragmented memories of a time when the world was one, and in their silent, stony hearts, they still remember the epic of Rodinia. Section 9. The Earth's Rhythmic Dance. Our journey to find Rodinia has taken us deep into the past, to a world so alien it feels like a fantasy. We have witnessed the slow gathering of lands, the rise of impossible mountains, and the great and terrible breaking of a world. It would be easy to see this as a singular epic event, a unique chapter in our planet's history. But as we zoom out, pulling our perception away from the specific details of Rodinia, a new and even more profound pattern begins to emerge. The story of Rodinia is not a standalone epic. It is a single verse in a much longer poem. It is one cycle in a grand rhythmic dance that the Earth has been performing for billions of years. The supercontinent cycle. The same mantle convection, the planet's slow heartbeat that we saw assemble and then destroy Rodinia, is itself cyclical. The arrangement of the currents is not permanent. Over immense spans of time, the patterns of upwelling and downwelling shift and reorganize. It is a slow, chaotic but recurring dance. And as the mantle's currents dance, so too do the continents on the surface. Think of the continents as pieces of foam floating on our pot of slowly boiling soup. For a time, the currents might conspire to push all the pieces of foam together into one corner of the pot, forming a single clump. This is a supercontinent. But the presence of that clump, that lid, changes the dynamics of the boiling. It insulates the area beneath it, causing heat to build up, eventually forcing a new, powerful upwelling to form right under the clump, which then breaks it apart and scatters the pieces once more. For a time, the pieces of foam drift separately, but the currents will eventually reorganize again and begin to push the scattered pieces towards a new point of convergence, a new corner of the pot, and the cycle begins anew. This is the supercontinent cycle. It is the planet's deepest rhythm. Geologists believe the Earth has gone through this process of assembly and dispersal at least 5 or 6 times over its long history. Rodinia was not the first supercontinent, and it was not the last. Let's rewind the film even further back before Rodinia. The evidence becomes scarcer, the trail colder, but the ghosts are still there. Many geologists believe that around 1.8 billion years ago, another supercontinent existed which they have named Columbia or Nuna. Its fragments are even more scattered and debated than Rodinia's, but the telltale signs of a global-scale collision and mountain-building event at that time are present in the rock record on nearly every continent. Columbia, too, would have formed, trapped the mantle's heat, and then been ripped apart, its fragments scattering to drift for hundreds of millions of years before the mantle currents rearranged themselves to begin the great gathering that would become Rodinia. And before Columbia, perhaps there was Kennerland around 2.7 billion years ago, and even a theoretical first continent or UR continent, called Valbara over 3 billion years ago when the continental crust was just beginning to form in significant amounts. Each one a verse in the song. Assemble, stabilize, insulate, break apart, disperse. Now let's run the film forward from Rodinia's demise. The fragments of our lost world drifted apart, opening up new oceans like the Iapetus, the ancestor of the North Atlantic. These new oceans provided the stage for the Cambrian explosion, the riot of animal evolution that filled the seas with trilobites, armored fish, and strange, alien arthropods. But the dance continued. The mantle currents shifted again. The continents, the children of Rodinia, began to converge once more. The Iapetus Ocean began to close. Laurentia, North America, collided with Baltica, Scandinavia, and a smaller continent called Avalonia, containing England and Wales. This collision, happening around 420 million years ago, created another colossal mountain range, the Caledonian Mountains. The roots of these mountains are what we see today in the highlands of Scotland and Norway, and also in the northern Appalachian Mountains of North America. They were once a single unified range, before the Atlantic opened and split them apart again. One by one, the other continents were drawn in. The great southern continent of Gondwana, massive piece of Rodinia that had stayed largely intact, containing South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia, crashed into the newly formed northern landmass. This final continent-crushing collision formed the last and most famous of the supercontinents, Pangaea. This was the world of the early dinosaurs around 250 million years ago, a world once again with one giant landmass and one giant ocean, Panthalassa. The formation of Pangaea caused the largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, the Permian-Triassic extinction, as the elimination of shallow seas and extreme continental climates wiped out 95% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial life. Pangaea is much younger than Rodinia, so its story is written more clearly in the rocks. We can see precisely how South America fits against Africa, how North America snuggles against Europe, but the cycle as always continued. Pangaea too began to trap the mantle's heat, too developed a fever, and around 200 million years ago it began to rift apart, a process we are still in the middle of today. The Atlantic Ocean was born from one of these rifts, and it is still widening. The Indian Ocean was formed as India broke away from Africa and Antarctica and began its long, lonely journey north to collide with Asia, a collision that is still ongoing, still building the Himalayas. We are living in the dispersal phase of the supercontinent cycle. We are the children of Pangaea's breakup. The continents are scattered, the oceans are wide. But the dance is not over. The forces that move the continents are still at work. The Atlantic continues to widen, but the Pacific Ocean is shrinking, its floor being subducted into the mantle around its fiery rim. If we run the film forward into the distant future, we can make a prediction. In about 50 to 100 million years, Africa will continue its slow crunch into Europe, closing the Mediterranean Sea and raising a new Himalayan-scale mountain range. Australia will collide with Southeast Asia, but the great event will be the closing of the Pacific. As the Americas are pushed westward and Asia drifts east, the greatest ocean on Earth will eventually disappear. The continents will converge once more. In about 250 million years from now, a new supercontinent will form. Scientists have already given it a name, Amasia, for the joining of the Americas and Asia. The world will once again have one land and one ocean. The great rhythmic dance of the Earth will have completed another cycle. And that new world, with its new mountain ranges and its vast arid interior, will have a climate and geography as alien to us as Rodinia's was. And Amasia too will eventually suffer the same fate. It will trap the planet's heat, and the slow, deep, powerful heartbeat of the Earth will tear it apart all over again. This is perhaps the most profound realization of all. Our world, our familiar map, is but a fleeting moment. It is a temporary arrangement in an endless, cyclical process of planetary renewal. The Earth is not just a stage for life. It is a living, dynamic character in its own right, constantly reshaping itself, a restless and beautiful geological machine, forever dancing to the slow, deep rhythm of time. Section 10. A fleeting map and endless journey. As we draw our journey to a close, let us return to that quiet, weightless place in the cosmos, looking down upon our world. The Earth is turning below, a familiar sphere of blue, white, and green. But it looks different to you now. Your eyes have been trained in the language of deep time. You no longer see a static globe, a fixed and finished creation. You see a process. You see a fleeting, momentary arrangement in an immense, unfolding story. The map of our world, which seems so permanent, is written in disappearing ink. You can see the ghosts now hiding in plain sight. You look at the rugged coast of Norway and the towering peaks of eastern Greenland, and you see them for what they are. Two sides of the same ancient mountain, torn apart by a newborn ocean. You look at the spine of the Appalachians and see not just American mountains, but the faint, eroded echo of a time when Africa was pressing hard against North America, welding Pangaea together. And if you look even deeper with the eyes of your imagination, you can see the older, fainter scars of Rodinia's birth and death, a web of ancient connections that still secretly links our scattered lands. The world has a memory, and you have learned to read it. You understand now that the ground beneath your feet is not a foundation. It is a vehicle. You, your home, your city, your entire country, you are all passengers on a colossal continental raft, drifting across the surface of the planet at the speed your fingernails grow. You are on a journey that began long before the first glimmer of human consciousness, and will continue long after our species is a distant memory. We are temporary residents on a planet that is eternally remaking itself. There is something deeply humbling in this realization. Our human concerns, our histories, our empires, our fleeting triumphs and tragedies, they all play out on a stage that is itself in constant slow-motion flux. The very mountains we see as symbols of permanence and eternity are but temporary wrinkles, destined to be worn down to dust. The oceans we see as symbols of immensity and separation are just temporary puddles, destined to be squeezed shut by the inexorable dance of the plates. This perspective does not diminish us. It connects us. It connects us to a story so much larger than ourselves. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones. These are elements forged in the hearts of stars that died long before our sun was born. And the land you live on, the very rock and soil, is recycled stardust, a piece of a continent that has been part of other continents in other configurations in other worlds stretching back through the deep dark abyss of time. You are not just on the earth. You are of the earth. Your physical substance is inseparable from its grand cyclical journey. The story of Rodinia is a perfect metaphor for this endless process of creation and destruction, of coming together and breaking apart. It teaches us that nothing is permanent, not even the face of the world. But it also teaches us that endings are always the seeds of new beginnings. The destruction of Rodinia's sterile, monotonous world was the necessary precondition for the explosion of complex life. The shattering of its continental prison created the mosaic of isolated evolutionary laboratories that allowed for the beautiful, bizarre, and diverse tapestry of life we see today. Cataclysm and creation are two sides of the same coin. As you drift here in the silent dark, you feel the planet's deep rhythm. The slow, steady heartbeat of the mantle churning below. It is the pulse of deep time, a rhythm that sets the pace for geology, for evolution, for the very story of our world. We are living in a brief, gentle moment between the planet's great tectonic paroxysms. We are lucky enough to inhabit a world that is geographically diverse, with its scattered continents and varied climates, a world that is rich and vibrant precisely because it is in its broken phase. Let the image of Rodinia settle in your mind one last time. A vast, lonely continent of red rock under a pale sun. A world of silence waiting for its future to be born. It is a reminder that the world was not always as it is now, and it will not always be this way. We are just one frame in an epic film, one note in a planetary symphony. Our responsibility, perhaps, is simply to listen, to pay attention to the story the rocks are telling us, to appreciate the profound, beautiful, and terrifying dynamism of the planet that is our only home, and to understand that we are part of a journey, not a destination. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, let your mind drift on these slow continental currents. Feel the solid ground beneath you not as a static floor, but as a raft on a slow, deep river of time. The small movements and shifts of your own life are part of a much larger, grander motion. The earth is breathing and you are breathing with it. Allow this sense of immense, slow, and purposeful change to soothe you. There is a deep peace in understanding our small place within this vast, eternal dance. Let the story of our wandering planet guide you gently into your own quiet harbor of dreams. Good night.